Rob Wittman, Congressman, 1st District, Virginia, Republican. Also, he is the ranking member on the subcommittee of Sea Power Readiness, and he's with us now. Congressman Wittman, great to have you back, sir.
John, great to be back with you this morning. How have you been?
Good, and we're hoping that you can guest host our show on July, I think it was the 2nd or the 3rd.
Third. We're trying. We have on the July 1st and 2nd, we are marking up the National Defense Authorization Act. So it depends on how long that goes. Hope if it doesn't go into the 3rd day, we can pull it off.
So how we've set this up is you're slated for the 3rd. And if you can't make it, then I will sit in for you. So no pressure. My audience is hoping it's going to be Rob Wittman, but if you can't make it, I understand. So we've got that all set up. So you're flexible and loose. Yeah. Sir, lots to talk about. The president, it looks like today he's going to issue an executive order, justice reform that involves no chokeholds and other things that have to do with the police department. Have you seen it, and do you have any reaction to any of it?
No, I haven't seen it. I've heard bits and pieces of what might come out. Listen, I think those things are exactly what's needed during these times. I think some of the things that we've seen horrifies everybody. I do think the president is equally as horrified by this, understands that there has to be change. We have to be able to address these things. We've seen the division that's occurred across the country. Because of this, these things absolutely have to happen. As you saw yesterday, too, the Department of Justice has now opened up a civil rights portal for people to report violations of civil rights. That is an ordinary, everyday citizen can go to that website and through that portal provide information on what they believe are civil rights violations, again, making the system more transparent, more accountable. So, I think the president sees what's happening out there and is doing the responsible thing and saying, listen, we have an obligation to be able to get things done. I know, what I am doing in the 1st District, John, is I've created these unity and diversity groups, and I'm reaching out to leaders in the Black community and saying, hey, listen, what are the things that we need to do? And remember, it's not just law enforcement. There are other things out there that absolutely have to be addressed. There are issues with the economy, with education, societal issues, and we have an obligation to have meaningful conversations. And many times they'll be uncomfortable conversations, but we have to do that versus what we see going on around us today. You can't respond to the violence we see with violence. You have to be constructive about it, and you have to sit down and really look at what are the actions that are needed. And listen, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King gave us the best example. You take the elements around you in society and you have positive conversations, and a lot of times they will be uncomfortable ones, but that's how we as a nation address things. I mean, we have through our history done that. Now it's time to do that again, and I believe that it will be done, and we will come up with constructive change to make the world we live in a better place.
Nancy Pelosi has a number of, one major one and then other smaller things that has to do with justice reform, a bill that's being passed. Have they involved Republicans in this at all, or is it just this basically a political sideshow?
Well, they're not in the drafting of the bill. We have encouraged the majority there in the House to engage the Republicans to try to get our ideas into it. We believe we have a lot of additions that can make the bill better, and I think that's our obligation to be able to do that. It will be different than the Senate bill, so let's work through where we have ideas that can make things better and make this bill something that can easily pass the House and can easily come to a conclusion with what the Senate is pursuing and get that to the president's desk. I think the American people want us to do that. I think they're saying, hey, this is a nonpartisan issue. Get these things done.
I agree with you.
And that's what I hope this will be. This is a great opportunity for both sides to say, listen, we're going to put the political differences aside. This should not in any way, shape, or form be just a Democrat bill. I can tell you there are a lot of great ideas out there from members on the Republican side that need to make their way into this piece of legislation, and I'm hopeful that that'll happen.
First of all, thank you for saying that, because I believe this should be nonpartisan. If this thing comes down as one of these, Pelosi political football bills to be able to take to the election. I mean, what does that solve, right? It's not going to get through the Senate. If it did, Trump's not going to sign it. So you get nothing. But I'm sick of this stuff. If there's some real issues out there, let's address them.
Yes.
And let's do it in a bipartisan fashion and have a healthy conversation. But, the Democrats can't do that. That's the problem. They can't. They're incapable of doing it, or they don't want to do it.
Well, I think they are I believe required to do it because of the scope and the nature of this particular issue. This cuts across all elements of society, where people want their elected leaders at the local, state, and federal level to act. We got to have these difficult conversations, but John, people want action, and that's what leadership is about. Leadership is about getting the job done, and especially in this situation. And I hope that Speaker Pelosi sees it that way, because this should not in any way, shape, or form be political. This is nonpartisan. This calls for action that involves everyone, and I hope that that's where we end up.
I doubt it. I hope so. You're the eternal optimist, Rob Wittman. That's because you're married to Catherine Wittman, who's optimistic.
Yeah.
That's because you got to take the garbage out when you get home every night and walk the dog. That's why you're the eternal optimist. I cover this stuff every day. I mean, it's just the Democrats, all they want to do is get Trump out, and they'll do anything to do that. They don't care what it takes, including stripping children of the chance to get a decent education, crushing their athletic dreams. They don't care. As long as they can get this guy out, they're good. It's collateral damage. That's my narrative. Let's get to stimulus number 4. Steve Mnuchin the other day saying we're looking at another $2 trillion. Okay, well, the economy's coming back. We just added 2.5 million jobs. In Virginia, the Northam COVID-19 lockdown hoax, people have just busted out of it. I mean, I did a column yesterday this weekend, Congressman. It's over. I mean, thousands of people going to tournaments, soccer games, lacrosse games, all over the place. No masks, no social distancing. It's over. I mean, you can't burn down Richmond and then tell me you can't play a soccer game. It's done. So my question is, why do we need another stimulus bill?
Well, John, I think that we need to be looking very carefully at the dollars that have been appropriated and what dollars are unexpended from the CARES Act. There's still $100 billion left in the payroll protection plan coffers. And many banks have now terminated writing any additional loans for that particular account. There's money in a lot of other areas in the CARES Act that are currently unexpended. I think we have an obligation to go back and say, okay, what dollars are left there? And if there are things that we need to do, and I do think that there are things that this COVID-19 pandemic have brought out that need to be done, and one of those is rural broadband. If there's nothing that comes out of this, it ought to be a renewed effort to build out our rural broadband systems. If you look at, as you said, students out of school and connecting to students in rural areas so you can continue instruction. If you look at people having access to physicians' offices that were essentially shut down because of COVID-19. If you look at businesses that had to operate differently because of COVID-19, because customers couldn't come in the door, you see how important connectivity is. And to me, taking some of the unexpended resources that are in the CARES Act and saying, okay, we're going to build out this system. Some of those dollars went to things, John, like school systems, taking school buses and creating Wi-Fi hotspots around their county so that students can have connectivity to be able to do their lessons digitally.
Right.
You should be able to now make those permanent. You should be able to go to a fixed wireless provider and say, okay, listen, we got the hardware there. Let's put the antenna in to go ahead and make this permanent. And you should be able to use dollars that are unexpended from the CARES Act to be able to do that. I think we have an obligation to look at those dollars that are unexpended first before we get into massive amounts of additional debt. I mean, what's happened with the CARES Act to be able to keep businesses going, to create that bridge, I do think it was necessary. And I do think investment in the nation's infrastructure is a good thing. But I also believe you have to keep in mind the impact on our debt. And, the debt now is just becoming so massive. While this is a bridge getting us out of the current situation, I want to make sure that we use at least some of those dollars for tangible elements that will be there after COVID-19 is gone. And listen, we needed to help these businesses and individuals get through this, but there also needs to be some lasting impact of this with the $2+ trillion, almost
right.
$3 trillion that was spent there. So that's what I hope happens with this before we get into discussions about spending additional dollars.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Congressman Rob Wittman, Republican 1st District, Virginia, Ranking Member Subcommittee. I almost said Chairman. Maybe I'll be saying that in January again. Ranking Member Subcommittee, Sea Power Readiness, U.S., knows a lot about the Navy. So, Congressman, basically what you're saying is you want to pause on another stimulus until we evaluate the other stimulus that we have done. You are saying that there's still $100 million remaining?
$100 billion in the payroll protection plan.
$100 billion. That's what I thought you said. I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
$100 billion still remaining in the second PPP, and that's part of the CARES Act. Plus, there's other money in the CARES Act. So you want to see that fully allocated and where that goes before we're going to do another one. Just evaluate where we are and allocate that money first. That seems to me to make sense.
Yeah, I think we have an obligation to do that. And I think we have an obligation, too, to look very carefully at what the impact of all this debt is going to be on future generations. And listen, there are things that need to be done, but I think you have to take control of what's already gone out the door and determine what's left, and then look at, are there ways that we can redirect that? Are there ways that we can create some additional flexibility for unexpended dollars in those accounts? That, I think, is critically important for us to do.
So where do we go from here with this? Do you see the economy rebounding back? You had a great jobs report in May. We're going to do this again in June. And if we do, I'm telling you now, Trump is going to get reelected in a landslide. Democrats are panicking right now. So what happens?
Well, listen, I do think the economy comes back. There will be, I think, some reverberations there. The one big thing, John, that we're seeing, and I talked to you about this earlier, and that is supply chains. As businesses get back up and running, they need the raw materials for the things that they produce. I'll give you a great example. I was talking to some folks in the car business the other day, and they said, Rob, our big deal right now is inventory. We've got to have cars to sell. The U.S. manufacturing plants or the automakers are up and running, but their supply chains in places like Mexico can't supply some of the parts for these cars, so that's going to slow things down. So that's going to be an impact. Another thing, too, is as state budgets are dealing with this, some of the public works projects like road projects and those things are being put on hold. Now, Virginia's been in pretty good shape, but other states not so much. Some of them have cut back, so the folks that are in those businesses, and remember, it's not just the road builders, it's the folks that produce the aggregate, and all those elements, too, could be affected by this down the road. So I think it's critical as we look at this, how do we do things to make sure that we're helping the supply chain where we can, and then what are we doing, too, in elements where, we have projects on the books, they have been bid and now are being delayed. I do think that's another place where the federal government can look at it and say, are there unexpended dollars in the CARES Act that can be used to go directly to projects that have been bid and are just being delayed because of issues with states? Now, I think, there's been a lot of attention about let's just send money to the states and a whole issue about the financial management that states go through. But that's another element where those dollars are going to build roads and bridges and things that we need. That's another element that I think is legitimate to look at, expending those dollars in the CARES Act.
No school starting in Virginia in the fall. I know this is not a federal issue, and I've got to go, Congressman Wittman, but you've got to be kidding me, okay? You have got to be kidding me. No high school football, no baseball in the fall. People want to play soccer. There's athletics, a million other things to do. We've already robbed our kids of a decent education for an entire semester. There's no metrics that this governor has. There's nothing. There's no data. He has nothing to justify stripping kids of the chance to have a constitutional right to an education. Look at the numbers in Virginia for COVID, okay? Not a single person under 85 has died in like 3 weeks. That's number one. 80% of the hospital beds available. 85% of ventilators available. They're in warehouses. There's no justification for this, right? But he's locking down schools, or only 10 kids can ride on a school bus. This is whacked. When are Republicans here in this state going to stand up and say, we want our kids to go back to school? We've had enough. Who does this guy think he is? A monarch, a king, a dictator? He's now stripping kids of a chance to go back to school and hurting their education. They're falling behind. When are Republicans here in Virginia going to step up and tell this guy we've had enough?
Well, John, you bring up some great points. I've talked to my wife about it. In fact, she's off to school today to write curriculum for next year. And she, as well as many other teachers I've talked to, are concerned about the students not making progress. And John, for the talented students, you know, they're able to do things on their own. But what really concerns me are those students that have a difficult time in school, and that face-to-face instruction is absolutely necessary. And of course, the governor in his plan does place some emphasis on that. But the thing that concerns me too are those students in the middle. Many times they kind of get forgotten about. You know, if you're not on the upper end or not on the lower end, the students in the middle get forgotten about.
That's right.
And we have to make sure that we do everything we can to not just get students back in school, but there's going to have to be a lot of work to help students make up the progress that they have lost through this last year. So anyway, those things have to be done.
Well, look, you know, you're married to a school teacher. You get this, right? I mean, how long has Catherine taught in the public school system?
This will be her 41st year.
Okay, so she's been teaching for 40 years, okay?
Yes.
So you're married to somebody that really gets this, right? The distance learning thing is, I mean, look, it just doesn't work. I mean, I saw my son, who's a freshman in high school. My older son, 30 years old, Jack, is a teacher in the poorest area in the nation, in the Delta, in Mississippi. Half the kids in his high school English class don't even have access to high-speed internet. He had to go drive to their home and drop off packets. You can't learn. I mean, give me a break here. And there's no reason to have these schools closed down. And I'm just so upset that Republicans in this state, not you, I'll cut you out, but just they're just feckless. I mean, there's absolutely no opposition to this guy. He's shutting schools down. I would have think there had been just people would have gone crazy, and they're like, "Oh well, you know, we're a little gun shy over getting beat." Like, what? I don't know. I know that Catherine can't be happy about this.
No, she's not. She's frustrated because you know she's dealing with students almost on a daily basis, and they do things online, but she sees clearly that there's more that has to be done. And the challenge, John, is there are a lot of students that are regressing through this period of time.
Right,
are going to have
absolutely.
to go through a lot to catch up, and she's concerned about them, and that's going to reverberate throughout these students' lifetimes if we really don't get things going. So.
Thank you. It will reverberate through their lifetimes if we don't get it going. Bingo. You just hit it. That's the issue. Thank you. We're going to end on that note. Congressman Rob Wittman absolutely nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. That's it. It's going to reverberate through their lifetime. This guy is playing politics with kids' lives, and it's sick. It's sick, and nobody's standing up to him, and I'm done with that. Thank you, Congressman, for your time. I enjoyed it.
Sure.